Howdy, folks. Happy Thursday. It is, a little windy and a little cold and
stormy by me.
Not cold like January cold, but colder than it was like 90 degrees and, sweating your, what's off.
Yeah.
Yesterday. And then we got a rainstorm and garbage blowing all over the, all over the place, because the winds were so big. And then this morning I woke up and it was nice. I mean, I like 70 degrees, but when you're 90 in a sauna the day before, it's a little bit of a change. But anyway,
sure.
Okay. Let's start with the pre-show. Anthony says he'll be here in a minute. He's dealing with an ant invasion in his kitchen. So he's got to put the traps down. Go ahead.
All right. While you hear Kaya, because she's still nervous from the storm. Pete Crowe Armstrong, drafted by the New York Mets. Interesting pick, a center fielder. They're like, well, maybe he'll be the Jared Kelenic answer. And while that's all nice to say, I'm taking a picture of Kaya because people won't believe that she's doing this. While it's nice to say, I don't think he is. I think we never know what these kids are, but I know baseball in the sense that I can watch his video and see how he is as a swinger and see what he looks like. And when you watch him, he's a lefty and he's got a little bit of an uppercut. And they're like, well, he doesn't have power, but they hope it comes around. Well, they said similar things about Brandon Nimmo. And last year he had 17 homers. This year 2 years ago he had 17 homers. Then he had 8. He's hit 31 homers in 3 years. Like, aside from help, which you know what I mean by help, the power is not coming around. So, end of the day, I never like the pick when they say, well, he's got all the tools, so he's got 4.5 tools, but the power will come. It's like most of the time in baseball, the power doesn't come, especially when you watch the swing. So,
unless the power is artificially enhanced.
Right. So, like I said, it's a decent pick. But I'm not going to go crazy over it, and he's not going to be there for 3 or 4 years. So that's the big thing. Kaya just moved the screen here. So you talk about the Yankee pick. I'm going to move her.
Well, I won't. The only thing that was funny is because Russ and I are big baseball fans, but anybody knows the baseball draft. The draft it's not a joke, but it's not like the NFL draft or the NHL draft for that matter, where you're watching and something about these players. Either you've studied up on them, or if you're like in Canada and you see junior teams and you see them play all the time, or they play in the Memorial Cup or anything like that, you have some knowledge about these players. And the NFL, obviously, or the NBA, it's college football or college basketball. But here you're going in and they're drafting, freshmen in college or high school guys, and you don't know about these players. Maybe you read an article in The Athletic or you read something on ESPN. So when you go into the draft and, the Yankees made the 28th pick and they picked some catcher from the University of Arizona, and they're trying so hard to make this look exciting. Major League Baseball, it's on the MLB network, and they show like the mom and dad and all the kids pumping fists like it's the NFL draft, and it's like, okay, we know nothing about this guy. They can, I'm not saying that like this kid's not going to be a major leaguer, because odds are he's going to get an opportunity, but the MLB was trying so hard, Russ, to make it look like these picks were consequential, and it was like, oh my God, of course they took Austin so-and-so.
Yeah.
Austin Wells. Like, oh, yeah, that was a steal at the end of the first round. Who knows him? Nobody. Not even Keith Law knows him. So,
past the first few picks, it's always a shot in the dark. Even when we're watching video doesn't tell the story of an 18-year-old, what they're going to do down the line. But the part that I do think, there's 2 things that really struck me about that draft. The first one was, we are all conditioned to not care about the MLB draft anymore. And ESPN was trying to make it like the NBA draft, and you can't do it. That fan base, and though the 2 fan bases are completely different, and there's things that baseball fans care about that basketball fans don't care about. And when Jessica Mendoza did an interview with the number 2 pick before the draft, and the best thing she got out of him was him playing with his hair, you knew there was a problem. The other thing was when they showed at least a couple of the picks I saw, you got 20 people in the living room and nobody's wearing a mask. Now, if nothing else, Major League Baseball should have casually suggested to these people, hey, that's not a smart thing to do. And you know what? Even for optics' sake, you should have a mask on. Nothing. And, considering what's going on in the world, I felt that was kind of tone deaf too.
Yeah, but we're talking about, Anthony, we're talking about the major leagues that can't even negotiate an agreement to get the season started. And you've got a commissioner who basically promised yesterday 100% we're going to play baseball, which means I'm going to hold your feet to the fire, players, and give you a 48-game season unless you make some sort of concessions, because you have to play if I say 48 games.
Good luck. Nobody needs to say anything in that regard. It's nice of Rob to make that kind of ultimatum. Falls on deaf ears. Ultimately, the players are just going to wink that off.
Yep, I agree, and that's what I told Mike. But Ann, talk about your pick. The Phillies did something that they don't normally do.
Yeah, they ended up taking Nick Abel, number 1, a player with 8 letters total in his name, which is not something I'm used to seeing.
Well, it's like Von Hayes. Remember him?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was a few more. Yeah, about 8. There you go.
They didn't draft him though, Mike. He was
the 5 for 1, as Pete Rose called him, and that was not good for him when he came over. But that's the Heat. No, Abel's an interesting, certainly an interesting pitcher. He's got a lot of the, fascinating miserable, but you're talking about a guy who's like, 5 years down the line. But again, his size, most of the reports that I've seen on him are pretty impressive. It's just, it was outside of what the usual of what the Phillies have done, so much so that, Keith Law put his neck out and said they're unlikely to, almost like no chance of them taking a high school arm, maybe a high school shortstop. And then they go and take a high school arm, and it's like, insider?
Right. Well, that's the thing. You never know when a team is going to like somebody to the point where they're willing to go away from what their normal history is.
They've gone away from, they have not touched a high, what I would call a high upside pitcher in a long time in the draft. Probably Nola is the closest, but Nola was like a sure thing because he was in college. Right. Whereas you're taking a kid 18 years old straight out of high school. This is a long Nola they took because they knew he was going to be ready in literally a couple of years.
Right.
This is different in this circumstance where they're trying to, have that, a bellwether starter. I mean, when I start hearing, we always get our comparables, which we roll our eyes at, but I start hearing Verlander thrown around, and it's like, oh God.
Yeah.
Well, can we not?
The only thing I could add, and then Mike, you should go. The only thing I'll add is the Mets never used to do high school kids either. And for the last 3 drafts they have, Jared Kelenic, who's going to be great, will be great for Seattle. So that doesn't help, but he was a good pick. Brett Beatty, they took last year for third base. He's already developing really well. And I don't know about, Pete Crowe Armstrong just yet, but I'm just saying it is working out. So it does show if you have a good scout that scouts that area well, and I guess that the Phillies must feel like they do at this point in time.
They were pretty. They're one scout who had really seen him. I think it was Hunter, I believe, who saw him. I forget his full name.
So that's a big.
He was like he stumped hard. It sounds like it reminds me a bit of like with the Flyers when Mark Gregg was really stumping really hard for a couple prospects, and it reminded me of certainly the pro overall pick was certainly Gregg, and I remember he wanted Mirko Mueller over Sam Morin, and I mean both we'll have to see with obviously both players, but I mean it's always good to see sort of a scout willing to kind of who feels that strongly, and you go
put their job on the line.
Well,
it is
just one further thing, and then we'll start. I've seen reactions about players in previews of NHL players or NBA players or NFL players. I've never seen anything more scathing than what Keith Law wrote about the Boston Red Sox first round pick. He basically said this guy, first of all, he said he wasn't even in his top 100. He didn't understand why he was picked. And just let's just say it was the Hugh Jessamine pick of the Boston Red Sox.
But even this guy has more talent. Like the interesting thing was he hurt his shoulder. So basically, everybody's like, well, he can't be a shortstop now, probably a second baseman. But the Red Sox wanted a second baseman. So why would you pan a kid right away? It's stupid.
Well, I think part of it is also is he's committed to go to college. There's a likelihood he's not going to sign. There's strong enough rumors that the viewpoint is that if he doesn't, they're going to get the comp pick, at which point they'd pick a different guy next year. And the whole point of picking this guy was with the view that he wasn't going to sign and he's a lower-rated guy, which then they'd be able to take somebody else next year who they have much higher rated. We have a bit more of a season to evaluate players. That was part of it, especially since they don't have a second-round pick this year either.
Well, I'm assuming,
but he's gonna be slotted if Pete Crowe,
Armstrong,
thanks, is slotted for $3.36 million as a height. Then this guy's slotted for more. Why is he going to go to college?
Well, just because he's slotted doesn't mean they're going to offer him that.
Right, but I'm just saying he could be looking for at least a couple of $1 million payday. And in this climate,
I would be taking that money and running and having them pay for college down the road.
Right.
Well, the Yankees must have loved the kid that they drafted in the first round because
the catcher out of Arizona.
Yeah, they drafted him in the 35th round a couple of years ago when he was out of high school. Now they're drafting him again. Is this Garrett Cole where they, like I said, they drafted him? I think they drafted him twice, and he still didn't go to the Yankees, but
including once in the first round.
Yeah, so we'll see. But I mean, all right. I guess we'll.
$300 million makes you sign.
Yeah. Well, apparently making $12 million instead of making $36 million in a third of a season isn't enough to sway some of these players to play.
And I should say Brown was making $7 from 36. So
yeah, but the one difference this year, I think right now they're only giving these first rounders $100,000 each and having them come back for the rest next year, which then Jan could play into this kid going to college. But still, it's $100,000.
Well, I mean, I got a chance to listen to the Mets had posted the press conference with Pete Crowe Armstrong, and the interesting part was that Bill Brody was at the end, and he made the point like you did. They still have to sign the guy, right? That's not going to be a guarantee this year. It never is, but this year, especially the kind of aberration of a season it is, these guys may opt to go back to school potentially. The interesting part is guys who go from rounds 2 through 5, because of the way the draft is now. I don't know if I'm taking a chance of maybe coming back and sliding out of the top 5 rounds and getting $20,000 next year.
Yeah, for $20,000, they're not going to sign. That's true. The other thing is, though, Jan, and I only found this out this morning because I didn't really care to find out last night. Pete Crowe Armstrong is a CAA client.
Yep, I know.
So the fact that Brody picked a kid that is with his old firm probably does give him a better chance of signing him.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kid. Look, you and I have different views. This is the kid I really liked. I would have understood if they went for the kid Gabriel Mitchell out of UCLA, but I love the upside and especially the defensive upside that you get out of Crowe Armstrong. But and of course, his mom was the mom in Little Big League. So
yeah, I didn't see Little Big League. The only other thing I'm going to add, Jen, is Mike, while you're thinking about that horrible movie,
which movie?
But Little Big League is a horrible.
We had
not horrible.
Okay, but anyhow,
Griffey's in it.
Whatever. But with Pete Crowe Armstrong, after you look at him and you could imagine him, getting stronger or whatever, he doesn't have a classic uppercut swing. And when you tell me that a player is going to get power like you hope for it, it's the same hope as Brandon Nimmo getting power. 15 homers a year is what you're going to get out of a guy nowadays when you say you hope to get power. But everything else is good, though.
No, like I said, if they took Mitchell, I would not have been surprised. If they took the pitcher that ended up going to Tampa 24, that was another guy they had on the radar screen, which wouldn't have surprised me either because that was a guy that's supposedly been rumored. But as we talked about last night a little bit on our chat on Twitter, the mock drafts got blown up really early this year.
Yeah.
Yep. And the mother from Little Big League was also in one of my favorite shows, The Equalizer. So there you go.
Oh God!
Sorry, Ross, my fault. I should have realized.
I checked her IMDb, and she was.
You know what? She's probably so embarrassed from that. They didn't even mention that.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Thursday, June 11th, 2020.
I'm Jan Levine.
I'm Russ Cohen. I'm Russ Cohen, and congrats to NASCAR for finally getting rid of the Confederate flag and making it illegal at their events. I applaud them.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. We we got some news to talk about. It came out a couple hours ago, and we'll go down. We'll start talking about that because it's a big announcement in terms of moving closer to playoff hockey.
And we knew this was coming, and we knew it would come either this week or early next week. I was on Sirius the other day, and I said, I got to believe something's coming out Friday or Monday. I just had a feeling.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
Yeah, they got it out a little earlier because
yes.
I think they didn't want to announce it on Friday because that's the day where everything gets drowned out because it's the weekend. So they wanted some traffic on it. And what we're talking about here is the NHL announced and the PA announced that Phase 3 will start. Remember, like last week, they said it won't start earlier than July 10th. Well, today they said it's starting July 10th. So
right.
They didn't move, it wasn't like mid-July or whatever. And I think this is a reflection, and I think, Russ, you said this when we were talking about this last week, that these players, and I think I mentioned this too, these players are going to be skating, like Phase 2 started on Monday. They're going to be skating for over a month, doing nothing because there's no coaches. The teams like the Leafs that have like 20 players, they were smart enough to like structure their workouts, the groups into lines and defensive pairings. And I think other teams will probably do that once more players come, but there's no order to this. So they, until they get into official training camps, there's a lot of time to kill just to get back into some sort of shape. But now we know those camps will start on July 10th.
Yeah, I mean, players like the certainty of a date. We knew that would be the case. But, I'm not going to be one that jumps on the NHL because I heard some radio locally here saying, well, they could have had the whole audience. They could have. But the issue is even the NBA's date isn't necessarily certain because now a lot of players are starting to pipe up like, hey, what does this mean health-wise to me? And so I think the NHL probably took all that into account. And I think because – they had spoken to their players all along, this is probably what the players want. And at the end of the day, they're doing a lot of what the players want because they're the most at risk. And I feel like of all the sports, they're respecting their players the most. So, at the end of the day, I can't be upset about that.
So remember, all the players aren't there yet, right? The majority of them are not there yet, right? So part of that is incorporating them back into the scheme, getting them on the ice, making sure that they have ample enough time so they're not going to pull anything when games actually start. And then also towards the latter part of Phase 3 before Phase 4, there will be exhibition games, right? So they already said there will be 2 exhibition games in those hub cities before Phase 4 starts. So that's another factor. So having a month now gets players to the point of where when they go to July 10th and camps open, that it's going to be ramping up almost from day one or close to it because you only have a couple of weeks to get ready for the playoffs or the play-in round with only at most 2 exhibition games to find your timing and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, like again, none of this surprises me, but I find it curious that July 10th is the date. After last week they mentioned that date, but the thing is that most indicators are that these training camps are only going to last about 2 weeks. So if that's the case, and then they play 2 exhibition games, which would take maybe 3 days between all these teams, 3-4 days at the most.
All right, wait, I've got breaking news.
Go ahead.
Oh, God.
So in a table read for the new Soprano series, which I will never watch, David Chase accidentally leaked it in an interview that what we saw from the final Sopranos episode, Tony did indeed die. We've all been wondering for a decade.
Of course. He's saying that now because James Gandolfini is dead. But if he was not dead, he would have been alive because they were going to do movies.
Well, I don't know if that's the case because he was mad. He cursed up a storm after that. So I don't think he wanted to say it either way, Mike. But I'm just saying now we all know. And it's great. I'm glad I know because now I have zero interest in watching this prequel. I have nothing.
So can I give you real potential breaking news as opposed to breaking news? So Ryan Rishog from TSN just tweeted, looks like a solution to the 14-day quarantine is on the way from the federal government that it should allow all 3 Canadian markets to remain viable options as hub cities and for Canadian teams to hold their training camps north of the border. Details to come in the next few days.
Okay,
but you know what? I'm going to remain skeptical until he actually gives us information. There's no information there.
I know.
No, I mean, he wouldn't put that. Rashad.
No, I mean, there's always hope, right? But I'm saying until you hear defined things like this is what they're going to do and this is what they're proposing and this is, to me, it's just like whatever. You're hoping because you're a Canadian reporter and you're hoping that there's a hub city that's Canadian. We have to say it like that, Mike, because again,
but let's just say that more than likely, I think Edmonton has as much of a chance as Toronto and Vancouver does because of the fact that COVID hasn't broken out there. But there are some people who say because it hasn't broken out there, that means it's due to break out there, and that makes it more susceptible to an outbreak than the other places that have had it already. And I don't know what's bull crap and what's true, but I've heard that from a number of people. So let's just say this. I know that David Pagnotta wrote yesterday or the day before that when that announcement from Reuters came out that the 14-day quarantine was still in place, that it didn't close the door on the 3 hub cities.
Nobody wants to say publicly that they're going to close the door on these hub cities because it's in Canada and people love hockey there, and there's going to be a scream if that happens. But again, until Justin Trudeau actually says, yeah, you know what, we've got a plan that keeps hub cities, I'm not going to believe it. It's all hopes and prayers. That's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know who to believe right now. I heard Ron McLean on Toronto radio this afternoon on Hockey Central, and he mentioned Vegas and the LA Anaheim area. So it's like, I mean, right now it's like throw a dart at a dartboard and determine who is getting the hub city. The one thing that's clear from Pagnotta's report is they're a ways away from determining a hub city. So I bet you anything, you won't even find out the hub city probably in early to mid-July when training camps are starting. They may wait until the very last moment to announce hub cities.
Yeah, and there's nothing from Justin Trudeau anywhere in public saying we're considering doing something so that we could have hockey here. Until he does that, you could have all of these breaking reports, and if you don't give me any information in the report other than saying they may have a solution and this is what it might be and this is what it could do, I'm going to say it's all hoping because, again, that's what they're hoping hockey will stay in their country. And I get it, but again, come on.
Well, you can say that about anything, right? We're all presuming all the timelines that have been laid out and all the best laid plans are actually going to happen, but none of us know exactly what's really going to happen in general because, as we've seen, as things have opened up like we all expected, the numbers are spiking again, and they're rising fairly consistently, and that could put a halt on potentially everything. And I know there's people I've seen on Twitter and everything else going, just don't do anything, right? Just, end it. But that doesn't seem to be the route that everybody wants to go in.
Now, Anthony, while you were away, Russ had seen breaking news, Jan had seen breaking news that Ryan.
I should tell him the other breaking news. Just so you know, Ant, Tony Soprano is indeed dead. David Chase confirmed it in an odd and awkward way, but he is indeed dead. If you cared or not, just letting you know.
No, I mean, listen. I mean, that was always the direction it was leaning towards. It was just that he didn't want to present the violence of that scene where everybody in that family basically was about to die. That's really, if I have to look at it in any way,
yeah, you're probably right about that.
I think if it would have been again. Remember, this is prior to Game of Thrones, so for HBO,
prior to the Red Wedding, yeah,
exactly. Where it would have been really, it wouldn't have been 100% unexpected, but I still think it would have been jarring and horrifying. And he left it to the imagination, and that's really when I watched the end of that show, how I kind of interpreted that was about to happen.
And I'm of the opinion that that's where Chase is now because James Gandolfini is gone. But there was a lot of speculation after the series had ended. There were going to be movies made, and if that was the case, then Tony wouldn't have been killed off. Now he's being killed off because again he doesn't want to see anybody else play.
There's no point exactly. I know there's talk of doing a series, a prequel. Yeah, I could see that happening. But the problem is that they're going to need some time.
Yeah,
because there's been, it's almost Soprano's almost out of people's consciousness at this point.
Yeah, just don't go there. So anyway, getting to the real news. Jan had seen that Ryan Rishaga had reported that there might be a window in terms of the 14-day quarantine that they may give exemption to these NHL players returning, which would also open up the possibility of hub cities, one of them being in Canada. And according to David Pagnotta and other reports I've read from Pierre LeBrun and Elliot Friedman, the NHL would like one of the cities to be in Canada simply for budgetary reasons, because the Canadian dollar is at 70% and they could save money on hotels and things of that nature.
Details to come.
Well,
okay,
more coming.
King of the snark today, I swear.
No, but I mean,
Go put on your green shirt again.
If
No,
you
no,
want to get
his Mets. No, when he's got his Mets hat on, then the snark just comes at full.
I'm a Mets fan. Keep quiet down in the Philly area, Anthony.
think about it.
I'm a high school pitcher.
I'm a Yankees fan. I'm better than all of you.
Put that on his head. I'm not saying that about you.
But think about it. Both of these types of reports have no details whatsoever.
Right,
None.
they don't have them. There's like initial thoughts, and any news is what's worth it, and they're going to get it out there. Click, click, click.
Well,
That's
retweet, retweet.
And you could have argued the same with the NHL announcements, right? How much? I mean, not all of them had a tremendous amount of details.
No,
Because
but at least there was something, and it was coming from the league.
Oh.
This is all coming through. If you're going to use a source for something, give us a little detail. There is absolutely no detail.
Yeah, all you need to know about the uncertainty of everything going on right now is when the Calgary Flames, on the same day that the report from Reuters comes out about the extension of the non-essential deadline being extended to July 31st, Calgary comes out that day and says, well, they're preparing for the potential of having their training camp on the U.S. side. And Vancouver said that as well. So you'd think all 6 Canadian teams that are in the playoffs would be doing the same thing, because it makes it impossible. It's stupid to have players come back into Canada to have to sit for 14 days when they could all meet in a U.S. area and practice all at the same time.
Okay, look, I'll tell you that this report tweet from John Shannon is better than anything we've heard. At least it says, NHL remains in constant touch with the Canadian government on quarantine issues and border closure. Source suggests border closures are not an issue, which leads you to believe there will be a resolution before camps open. That's at least some detail.
Right.
That gives you something versus, a nebulous stuff that,
Said
quite
something
frankly,
from
we
the
got
federal
there.
government. I mean, I don't know if you can get more specific than that, but
Yeah, I guess. I mean, right. So right now it's, let's just say this. Right now, we're getting some hard dates. We know now July 10th, phase 3. You would assume, based on what we've heard from other indicators about training camp, 2 to 3 weeks, which would take it to the last week of July. Then we're talking, one of the other things was revealed, like Jan said, 2 exhibition games before the play-in round begins. So we're talking at the absolute latest. And remember, the PA has to sign off on this. All the players have to sign off on this before they go into phase 4. But assuming there is nothing that trips everything up, we're talking about probably the last week of July or early August 1, for the start of the play-in round, which would mean the playoffs will end, October? Yeah, the beginning of October.
Yeah, and gives you enough spacing for a January, early January start to the season, I would think. To the following season, excuse me. So.
All right. Well, another thing we failed to talk about yesterday, I wanted to bring it up, but I just forgot about it, was the report from Pierre LeBrun regarding the NHL participating in the Olympics in 2022, and how that is still, there's advancing talks of a new CBA, about whether it is as much of a sticking point as it was before the pandemic. And this is the thing. I have no evidence, and this is just my personal feeling. I don't get the feeling that the NHL, in spite of the fact that it was like a little bit of a carrot for the PA, because they know the players want to go and play in the Olympics. I get that. But do you think that maybe they're rushing into it and going to the birthplace of COVID-19 is someplace that they really want to go in 2022? I would think if they moved the Olympics someplace else, which is not going to happen, then I think then there would be a greater chance of the NHL sending their players to the Olympics in 2022. If it's Beijing, I don't know if they're going to want them to go, because you could potentially be sending your best players and increasing the possibility of getting infected if there is not a vaccine by that point. Who knows? We're talking about 18, 19 months away, but it's high risk.
That's the key in terms of it. We're talking 18, 19 months away and seeing where things are here, also there. In terms of how pandemics work in that respect. So I think right now it's just everything is in a holding pattern. I think that's one of those things where, again, like most events that happen this year, if it's bad, closer to the date, the cancellation, I would see then maybe the cancellation happens then. But they're gonna hold to that until that occurs.
I agree.
Jan?
Yeah, I could see that. I still think the Olympics are very much a long shot, especially given all the conversations that have happened with the NHL to date and the lack of interest in that regard. But I do think part of it could be driven depending on the level of interest associated with when we actually get to the playoffs. If there is a spike and the NHL thinks that there's interest, great. And if not, and they think they need to raise interest, and by going to the Olympics and potentially getting on the landscape that way again would drive more eyes on the prize and bringing guys into the seats, then that would be the direction. But I do think you could see somehow the games now having an impact in terms of what the decision is going to be.
Now, this is interesting from Elliot Friedman's 31 Thoughts, just posted a few minutes ago. Something we talked about before about the size of the rosters. We've heard about 28 skaters and as many goaltenders as you want to carry. And he was basically saying that the NHL has asked their teams to submit the names of the additional players, the taxi squad, so they could be added to the roster for the proposed Phase 3. There's no certainty right now. Nothing is etched in stone, but he lists a number of names from different teams, and I'll just go through these quickly because I think it's pretty interesting.
I'm looking for one. I'm hoping for one.
Well, okay. He start with the West. Dallas will add Jason Robertson and Jake Ottinger, along with Ty Dellandrea and Thomas Harley. To their taxi squad. And
those are all good picks. Why not? Let them have some experience just watching.
Right. Nashville is considering Ilya Tolvanen.
Why not? It's got a great shot. If you got to use him.
Now,
especially if you're looking at a specialist situation, he could actually be deployed.
Yep.
I think it could be pretty effective.
Now, Vancouver, I believe, sent Sven Barchi down to Utica. I think he cleared waivers, but they said that they're talking about Barchi as a taxi squad option. Experienced guy, played with, has been in the NHL, so that makes a lot of sense. Winnipeg is waiting on Brian Little's recovery.
I don't know if he's going to make it.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's really that's sort of here or there.
Optimistic, I think.
Minnesota will include several players who had strong years in Iowa. Sam Annis, who led the Iowa Wild in scoring, goal leader Gerald Mayhew, and goalie of the year Capo Kakkonen. Yeah,
I mean Kakkonen and Annis. It's not Annis, it's Ennis, right? Annis. Sorry. He's a pretty good player. Like he's if I remember, he's like 6'2" and he's got a great shot. So that's another guy who, if you slot in for a short moment, a game or two, you probably can get something out of them.
Arizona is adding 2019 first rounder Victor Soderstrom.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, Chicago. Now this is funny. Chicago is waiting on some of its injured players. Calvin DeHaan, no way. Brent Seabrook, no way. Maybe Andrew Shaw or Zach Smith. I know that, but DeHaan, they said that those were season-ending injuries. I don't know. I can't see them risking Seabrook getting hurt again. Rushing him back. He didn't have one surgery. He had 3 surgeries. I think it was both shoulders and a knee.
Just because I looked it up, I want to mention Soderstrom had 16 points in 35 games. Like it wouldn't shock me if he ends up starting the playoffs.
Right.
Nope. Same here.
Well, their bottom pairing was bad all year.
It was.
You know, as well with the Hawks. Let's see. Alex Regula from London, Ian Mitchell, who Ian Mitchell they signed, so we don't know whether he'll be able to play because that might be one of those 2019-2020 contracts. We don't know.
Could be. It's a shame because he's really smart, really fast, great with the puck. Like if they could add him, that would really help their defense. It really would.
In the East, now I'm still waiting to see which name you're talking. What team are we talking about here, Russ? For the name,
it's in the East. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Okay, Washington is saying Martin Fevrier. I think that's how you pronounce it. Fervari. Thank you. And Connor McMichael.
Yeah, McMichael. Listen, that's another high pick of a guy who can really shoot the puck. Both of them are good players, but McMichael's the high end guy.
I'll just quote it directly here. Philadelphia would love to reward Oscar Lindblom after his courageous battle with Ewing sarcoma, but that may not be possible.
I asked about it, and nobody seems.
I am highly doubtful.
Issues of immunocompromised has to be considered.
Yes,
of course, exactly. Even if there was any recovery, we still have that.
Right.
So yeah, and so go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
No problem. Morgan Frost is on their list. That's not a shock.
No. You already experienced this season playing with the team, so wouldn't be hard to fit him in.
Carolina is considering 3 of their top prospects: Dominic Bach, Jake Bean, and Joey Keane.
I mean, Joey Keane, I don't count as high as Bach is. I mean, that's the guy they got from St. Louis. I mean, he could play defense. He could penalty kill. Like, there's some things he can do. No David Ayres on that list, huh?
Toronto said that they publicly.
Hold on. You can have as many goalies as you want. He won the last game for that team as a goalie, right?
Toronto said that they.
Moving on.
I swear, you know how to, Mike. I'm going to say it for you, Russ. You know how to beat a dead horse into dust.
He's still Women's Secretariat 25 years after.
And that explains all we need to know about Russ.
Thank you.
The Toronto Dubas mentioned a couple weeks ago about Nick Robertson. I'm not convinced he's going to play. I think they're basically
watch.
Right, he'll watch, and I think that's valuable. But I don't think he's going to play. I had people asking me, well, what line do you think he's going to play on? Well, I don't think he's going to play. So there you go. Columbus, Liam Foudy.
Wow, Liam Foudy could really be a wild card for them because that guy can skate. He's strong. He could be somebody that Torts instantly likes and finds a good role for him, and maybe even a role where he puts up some points. Their offense is so bad that he could be a nice little extra spark plug for that.
Now, as we mentioned yesterday, Florida might bring Owen Tippett because he had a really good year in the AHL.
He's got a great shot. Like his shot is fantastic.
And as we also said, Denisenko, he's up in the air because they still haven't determined the contract situation for the Romanovs and the Denisenkos and a few others. So, I'm sure St. Louis would probably bring Perunovic if there's a chance.
I don't think they're going to be able to.
Yeah. The Rangers, it says, are looking at both Kravtsov and Lias Anderson.
Yeah, I've written that already a couple of times. No surprise on either one of them. And Anderson, the lines of communication have been opened up a little bit between the two sides, even though he went back overseas. And there's definitely a thawing. I wouldn't say that the ice has melted completely yet, but there's definitely been a thawing in terms of the relationship that was very cold between the two sides. And Kravtsov came back, played at Hartford. I'm not surprised. Again, as you said, you have 28 skaters. There's not a lot of other guys. There's a handful of guys they'd bring forward from the minors. But those are two guys I can definitely see being part of the team potentially. I
mean, I tell you right now, I would use Anderson over Kravtsov because I can give Anderson a role, a defensive role. Kravtsov can do great in Hartford. I think he's going to be watching. I don't think he's going to do any playing at all.
No, but just to have him with the team, I can understand. Anderson, I could say, could potentially be your fourth line center, especially since we're not sure about Kakko, similarly because of the diabetes and the celiac. And then also, Brendan Lemieux is going to be suspended for at least one game, so they need to replace him in the lineup.
Yeah, I want to mention I got mixed up with another guy. He's only 5'8", but he had 70 points. He is a good goal scorer.
Yeah,
that's not right, but I got his size wrong. So who knows if they'll throw him in there or not.
Flamester in the chat saying Robertson is close enough. Close enough, Mike. I says, no, he's not.
He gets pummeled in the corner. Then what?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Like, he's a really great prospect. He had a fantastic year in the OHL. He led the OHL in scoring. He played great for Team USA in the World Juniors. He's 19 years old. He can't play in the American Hockey League next year, and you're going to insert him into an NHL playoff situation when they have depth on left wing. That's where he plays. Where are they going to sit Kyle Clifford, who they traded a draft pick for, instead of playing Nick Robertson? If they're hurt, maybe they will.
Right.
Maybe. But
so you got
yeah. Go ahead. Oh, okay. I want to touch on this before.
One other thing, Mike, that I thought was interesting in Friedman's 31 Thoughts. So he talks about, clearly we know that the jersey search for the GM and the coach has kind of been put on hold. But the interesting thing he wrote is New Jersey is considering continuing conversations around its GM position. It's also a possible position. It's called Chief Operating Officer. Incumbent Tom Fitzgerald remains a candidate, somebody who I think, based upon the trades he made, should get the job. The interesting part, I thought, is according to a couple of sources, one of the interviewees was NBC Blackhawks broadcaster Eddie Olchuk. Asked via text if he's spoken to the Devils, Olchuk replied, I speak to a lot of people in the NHL.
All right, but look, this is the problem with Josh Harris. Don't change what the hierarchy of an NHL front office is to represent one of your businesses. It is a business. You could run it like a business. But when you start taking out layers and you start going for personalities and going for guys that don't have any experience in that kind of position, and Eddie Olchuk doesn't. I love Eddie, but I would not hire him for that position. You're asking yourself for trouble. Let's say they hire Eddie Olchuk, right? And they keep Fitzgerald. Who is the real brain trust then in that organization when it comes to big time organizational things that you have to make big decisions on for the future? Who are you going to?
And let me extrapolate from that and bring it to the other thing we wanted to talk about before we talk about the Devils, because what you're talking about, Russ, is what happened in Buffalo a few years ago when the Pegulas hired Pat LaFontaine as team president. He was told by the Pegulas he would have complete control, and then Tim Murray undermined him, and Tim Murray actually had the power, and it was the Brian Miller deal, and LaFontaine quit in protest. He said, I don't have any power here. You've given all the power to the general manager. What the hell is this? That you can't operate a franchise that way. There has to be one boss. And if you bring in Eddie Olchuk, is he a face? Is he, or is he somebody who actually has power like Brendan Shanahan is in Toronto?
So I viewed it differently. I viewed Olchuk as possible for the GM role, which Fitzgerald is filling right now, not so much for a separate COO type role. In my view on it, look, I personally think Fitzgerald did a pretty darn good job in terms of the trades he made.
No question. Nobody's arguing
should be given a shot to be the full-time GM. Same with Nasruddin. I could have seen them keeping him as coach. They may go to Gerard Gallant or others, but I thought Nasruddin did a nice job in terms of getting that team ready to play every single night.
Well, Fitzgerald has been an ASGM.
Yep.
Right. So he at least has experience.
Yep, I agree.
Experience. What front office experience does Ed Olchuk have?
He doesn't. None.
It'd be like hiring Pierre Maguire.
Now, again, the Leafs had other people there. Lou was there to guide Shanahan. It wasn't like they just brought in Shanahan.
Well, they brought in Shanahan before, but he knew that he needed guidance, so he brought in Lou. Yeah.
Right. But that was because he knew that. Right. Nobody's going to do that in New Jersey. Olchuk's not going to he can't bring in Scotty Bowman. I don't think they're going to bring in anybody. And this team desperately needs direction. We still don't even know, and we'll get to it. We don't even know what the direction of the New Jersey Devils is.
Well, let's stick with the Devils, and then we'll finish with the Sabres thing.
Okay.
Because we're already talking about it. So, okay, we look at the Devils. They were on the outside looking in terms of the playoffs. Jack Hughes, their number one pick, did not get off to a good start, but I think as the season went on, he started to improve, become more acclimated to the NHL. Yep. They signed Heischer to a big deal, so they've got him locked up for long term. I look at this, I think that in terms of this year and in terms of his performance, the PK Subban deal was a disaster for them because they paid him $9 million and he didn't even play anywhere close to being the defenseman that he was. I think there were a lot of disappointments. Obviously, Corey Schneider is not an NHL goalie anymore, at least not an NHL starter. But it looks like Blackwood could be their goalie of the future because I think he played pretty well.
He had a good year. Not a great year, but a really solid year.
But, Russ, I look at this team, and I'm like, okay, you've got some nice pieces, but you're a long ways away, and there's also some very big holes. And I think the biggest hole on this team is on the blue line. I know they have Ty Smith coming, and they have a young guy like Severson, and I still like Will Butcher, but I think that their defense is a real sore area right now.
No, I mean, look, Subban has to step up. He is that defenseman they need. They need a solidified top four so that if you bring in someone like Smith, he could hang on the third pairing and develop. And Smith can do everything. Like, that's the good thing about him. He's not flashy. He doesn't take big chances. He does have offense in his game. He's fast. He's getting stronger. So those things are good. But if all of a sudden I'm making him a top four, then I got a problem, especially in the Metro Division, as hard as that's going to get. Subban has to step up here. I do think he'll have a better year. I don't think it was a disaster. I just think he didn't have a good offseason in training and had a lousy season as a result. I think he got embarrassed, and I think we'll see what kind of competitor he is when he comes back. It's still possible he's done, but I don't think he is.
Yeah.
You're right about Hughes. I think we saw better days out of him. Also, there were some things, like they kept messing around with his line. Who's on his line? That was an issue. Gusev started to play better, so that's fine. They have issues, though. Travis Zajac is aging. So that's a bit of an issue. He's still solid on faceoffs and solid on defense, but he's not going to give you a lot of offense. This team is still lacking some offense. I like Nathan Bastian. He's a big kid with good hands, but he's a little slow. If they could ever work him into like the 4C spot, that might be good. Because, again, if they could get some scoring on their fourth line, that's the devil's way, and that would be a good thing for them. They're going to have to rely on some youth to be ahead of schedule, which is always dangerous. And then they're going to have to be willing to make at least one high-profile move and stick to it. The Taylor Hall thing didn't work out. So, it worked out for a short time, but it didn't work out. They need something more long-term, and they desperately need more scoring.
So,
go ahead.
All had a good first year, obviously. And they made the playoffs, and then they tanked that year last year, resulting. And this year, the slow start and resulted in the trade because, remember, when the offseason ended and the season was close starting, a lot of people viewed the Devils as a team that was going to make the playoffs, right? They brought in Subban, they had Hall, they added Hughes, they added Gusev. You figured, combined with the other players that they had, that they were going to take that step forward, and they took a step back. I still don't think they got a ton in the Hall trade, especially given when they dealt him. They should have gotten way, way more, which is probably what paved the way for the exit of the old GM. Yep. I thought though that some of the other deals they made were pretty good. As you said, Gusev had worked out nicely. And to me, there's a couple of things. One, you figure with Hischier and Hughes, you're set as your 1-2 down the middle for a long while. Gusev is a top six winger. Miles Wood is a borderline top six winger. The thing they're going to have to really make a decision on is Kyle Palmieri. Do they view him as a guy to sign him for a long-term deal, which I don't think is the wisest course of action because they're going to want a really long-term deal, or do they deal him? If you're going to deal him, you probably deal him in the offseason to bring back multiple assets, though they could wait for the trade deadline, hopefully get a number one if he's having a good year and another asset. In goal, look, I thought Blackwood had a pretty good season. I think he is their number one goalie of the future. As you said, Schneider's regressed, although he found his game a little bit after going down to the AHL, where he came back up and wasn't terrific. He's probably a decent backup, but as you said, their blue line is really bereft right now. Subban was probably brought in for a lot of other reasons than hockey, in my opinion, in terms of kind of potential leadership and also just kind of what he might need for the team overall. They brought in Simmons, and they ended up moving him. They do need at least one or two more blue liners, and in my opinion, while they have good depth in center, including Bastian, you talked about, their wingers are going to have to upgrade the wingers, and that's probably going to be the target this year in the draft, depending on where they pick.
Well, in the draft, that's nice, but let's say they do trade Palmieri, where are you getting those 25 goals from? You've got to get somebody who can play the NHL level and maybe a second-round pick.
It may not matter right now, Russ, if they're intent on rebuilding. They basically think that they have to get something for
They're
Palmieri.
not intent on rebuilding. Josh Harris never wants to.
That's the thing where I'm a little.
He did in Philly.
Well, that's the thing I'm a little confused about.
For how long? They eventually abandoned that.
They traded Andy Green. They got a bigger
second round pick back.
Got a second round pick.
No, that was good.
They traded Blake Coleman and got a really good return for him.
They probably knew he wasn't coming back.
No, I mean, like I said, Fitzgerald, in my opinion, did a really nice job. He brought back lots of potential future assets to build up the team.
And there were as many rumors about Miles Wood as there were about Coleman. There's something going on with Miles Wood in New Jersey.
They couldn't even deal him.
Right.
Well, so you maximize your value of Coleman, right, because of the fact that where he went to, the role that he had in Jersey is clearly not the role he is having in Tampa, though Tampa was looking to fill a need, which they clearly did by acquiring him, and was willing probably to somewhat overpay to get him to fill that need.
Well, they still are going to have to make a big move. It was a disaster that they lost Taylor Hall because that they thought could have been their long-term solution, and it wasn't. It was a short-term solution. The other thing is when you look at this, if Josh Harris is truly going to start a regional sports network, which I don't believe you can, including teams in Philly, New Jersey, and New York, I think that's ridiculous. But if he's going to do it, you can't do it with a last-place team. And right now they're a last-place team unless they make some big moves. And then you can't get Taylor Hall because he's not coming back. But they need to find a 30-goal scorer somewhere in free agency.
Well, I almost think they're going to keep Subban now for one simple reason.
They are.
They have to get to the cap floor, not because he's still a good defenseman.
Well, whatever.
Who's giving you anything of value? You took on the full salary last year, which is why you got him so cheap.
They'd have to eat salary to get value for him. Now,
well, give me some free agent wingers? Like they need to get somebody.
Mike Hoffman.
Yeah, maybe Mike Hoffman.
Kreider would have been their target, I think, if he had gone to free agency.
I agree with that.
Off the window.
So now, maybe Hoffman. Maybe I'll tell you another one. If they're going to let him go, get Dandenov. Dandenov could score 20 goals easy, and maybe him and Gusev have some magic. But they are going to need something like that. If I were them, I'd offer Palmieri a 3-year deal and hope he takes it.
Now the question is, first of all, Russ, is the clock ticking on Michael McLeod, or is it over with?
No, it's ticking loud. I mean, he always had the speed, and he always had good hands and a pretty good shot, but thinking the game quickly was not his gift, and we saw some hiccups when he would have the puck. When you look at his Binghamton numbers, they're okay, but like 33 points in 55 games, this year was worse, 23 points in 47 games. So this is not good, and I'm not even caring where he was drafted anymore. Forget that. Right. Now I'm just wondering, is he even going to make it as a prospect? He's a great kid, but again, are you going to have Michael McLeod to be your fourth-line center? And the answer is no, because he's not good enough defensively. So he has to be a third-line center or bust at this point.
Now, final question on this before we predict. I don't know if we can make a prediction because we don't know where they're going to draft and what they're going to do next year. There could be a lot of moves.
It's going to be hard.
Yeah, it can be a lot of moves between now and the start of next season. But say they pick 4th or 5th in the upcoming draft, they have an extra first-round pick from. I think it would be via Vancouver. It would be Vancouver's pick via Tampa from the Coleman trade. So with that first pick, they'll be probably in the top 5. They're probably looking for, Perfetti, Rossi.
Yeah, Perfetti. Yeah. I mean, again, you don't know if Raymond will be there. Raymond would be like the high end of guys they could get. Perfetti also very high end. I like him. Rossi, same thing. You are hoping for those guys. If Stützle somehow doesn't go second and a few teams pass on him, maybe you're in position to get him. That is what you're looking for. They still can't pass on Drysdale either. If Drysdale's there, they're going to have to seriously consider it. You can't worry about what the fan base wants. You have to worry about what your organizational needs are too. And so, because they're in a spot, the Devils can probably be picking in the lottery again next year unless major things happen. So you've got to take what you feel is the best for your franchise. And I don't know if they're going to go best player available, but we named some of them. And so that's a good possibility.
And Richard in the chat asked when the lottery was. The lottery is June 26th. So we'll find out where the Devils pick at that point. Let's finish off with that report that we saw.
Well, we might find out because if there's 3 placeholders,
Right. Yeah, that'll just be.
If 3 placeholders come up like the Joker's Wild, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen.
Big bucks. No,
that's press your luck.
I know. So okay.
Jack Barr's turning over in his grave right now because he got Joker's Wild wrong.
No, Jack Barry.
Jack Barry, sorry.
It's close though. It's close.
I forgot what Jack Parr hosted. I'll remember in a minute.
The Tonight Show.
Tonight
Show.
No, there was something else.
He did a game show too?
I think so.
Okay.
So there was a report from Ja Worrell of Associated.
Well, actually, if you want to ask, Jan his outlook on what the Devils look like, as far as we didn't give a prediction, like are they making the playoffs or not, Jan? But I said unless big things happen, they're probably a lottery team again.
I agree. Yeah, I think there's right now there's way too many holes. I mean, look, is it feasible Subban has a resurgence and becomes the defenseman that we saw years ago in Montreal? And I mean, also depends. We said if they don't move Palmieri, right, that gives them their scoring winger. So we will know a better shot in terms of the makeup of that team when we hit training camp, because it is feasible that Palmieri could get moved before the draft.
John Worrell from Associated Press reported that Kim Pegula is going to remain as the Sabres team president, which again was not greeted with applause and standing ovations from the Sabres fans. Now, this is the weird thing, and I made this comparison to Russ, and Jan, I want to get your thought on it. It's similar right now in Buffalo to the sort of dichotomy that's going on at MSG right now, where Dolan, from Ranger fans, has to be looked upon as a great owner because he pretty much lets – before it was Sather, but now Davidson and Gorton operate the team. But the Knicks are a tire fire because he meddles, because Dolan meddles. And in Buffalo, the Bills are a well-run, well-oiled machine with Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. Now, this is after years of them being, a cluster F like the Sabres were, because they brought in Rex Ryan and there were some, and Russ Brandon was not doing a great job there. But now the Bills are on a positive track. But the Sabres, it is a comedy of errors. They've had, I believe, 4 team presidents. Kim Pegula is the 4th. And I get the feeling that the only reason that she's staying as team president right now is so they don't have to pay another team president. It is a disaster right now in Buffalo.
When you look at the Forbes list, they're like the third. They're third from the bottom as far as worth, something like $400 million, which for a pro franchise these days isn't great. Their season ticket base is down. They're downsizing the front office. I think their player development is partially broken, if not fully broken. And that's why we haven't seen some of these guys break through like you hoped they would. Even Alex Nylander had a halfway decent year for the Blackhawks. Mm-hmm. He never had a chance to even show that for the Sabres because it just wasn't working for him. So all of these things, it's like anything else. If you try and scrimp and save, you're going to just shrink your small market team smaller. That's what's going to happen here. And fewer fans are going to show up. And you're going to be just trying to break even. They should be putting a little bit more resources into this. I know they've lost money, but they're gaining it on the other end for franchise worth. And you have to be willing to make that adjustment. I get that that Pegula is losing money in the gas field right now, but that'll rebound. But the point is, if you keep shrinking this front office and you keep making changes and you don't get the right players and everything else, you're in a spiral here that's going to last like the Ottawa Senators. It's maybe going to be worse. And that's where it's going.
And Jan, just to finish off here before we end the show, I look at the Sabres, and the main factor, and we talked about this last week, is the fact that Eichel, who is their franchise player, their center, their not future number one center, their current number one center, and one of the better players in the league. The level of frustration that Eichel is going under is increasing with every year, and the fact that this team has not made the playoffs since 2011, which coincidentally is the year that Pegula bought the team. I mean, at a certain point, he's going to say, "Get me the bleep out of here," and that's what they have to worry about right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I know on my blog came up a lot of guys trying to figure out trades to be able to go ahead and get Eichel, which, given his salary, is going to be very difficult, but. Yeah, I mean, I don't think, and you'll agree with this, Mike, the reason they lost is not because of Eichel. Eichel has raised his game every single year. But as you said, it's the team around him that's lacking, which is part of the reason why if he does demand a trade, it's going to be because of the fact that they've had numerous years to put a team around him and have failed to do so.
Right, and the other than a kid like Middlestad, who we don't know how good he's going to be, and Dylan Cousins, their first round pick from last year, they have very few prospects in the pipeline. You know, you've got a Will Borgen here or a Samuelson there, but it's not like that AHL team had a good record in Rochester last year.
Couldn't score goals either.
Yeah, it was loaded with prospects. There were a bunch of 25, 26-year-old AHLers. So. This is something, and this is the reason why Botterill's job is in jeopardy, because I think he has to win next year to make the playoffs for them to keep him, and I don't think they're going to. So this is a disaster.
Two small things. I just saw a tweet from Steve Stamkos, and this is why I love Steve Stamkos. Killorn is showing a picture of himself like putting in his front yard, and Stamkos goes, "Oh, this is why you weren't at the rink this morning." That's why Steve Stamkos is a winner, because the first available minute he had a chance to be back at the rink, he's back at the rink. That's how much that guy wants to win. Not that Killorn doesn't, but I'm just saying it's just that he puts pressure on the rest of his guys to do that, and I appreciate that. The second one is, and this is bigger, did you ever see the draft picture for Link Gates? Okay, if you go, I just retweeted it. Everybody should go look at it. And what year was this? And it doesn't even say the year, but when the North Stars took him 40th overall, which is unbelievable that they would take a fighter 40th overall, he showed up at the draft with 2 black eyes. His draft picture is with 2 black eyes. And he had a barroom fight the night before. That's what the word is.
The missing link.
I mean, this is unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I see the picture. Wow.
Like, I'd never seen that. Could you imagine if a guy showed up at the draft like that this year? They wouldn't even put him on the stage. I think they would say, you know, look, he's not here.
Jeez. Well, on that note, we'll end the show here. We'll be back tomorrow with Kevin Allen and Eklund and a whole cast of characters. Who knows? For the departed Anthony Mangione, for Jan Levine, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.